As certified life coaches with 45 years combined experience in human resources, Jen Trum and Katherine Fry have both experienced the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, both personally and professionally. And what they each know to be true is this: our mental, physical, and emotional health are the essential building blocks in order to thrive and shine in the field of HR. So in a first of its kind podcast, we'll be getting real and to discuss and share what has contributed to both our struggles and successes, with the goal of inspiring women around the globe to stand tall and take the necessary action to both thrive and shine in HR. Here are your hosts, Jen and Katherine.
Welcome to Thrive and Shine HR. We are so glad you have all joined us today. We are so happy to be connecting with you today like this. Whether you're listening in, whether you are actually joining us live on this beautiful Monday morning. It's 8 o'clock where I am. It's 7 a.m. where Jen is. Jen, how are you today?
So good. Happy Monday, Katherine. It's
Happy
great to be
Monday.
with you today. I can't wait for this topic. This is going to be so much fun to talk about authenticity and transparency.
Absolutely. I love it. It's such a fun topic, certainly an essential topic, one that I found to be a little bit controversial last week. So I can't wait to talk about this today. But before we dive in, I'm just curious, what was the best part of your weekend?
Oh my gosh. So I got to pull together a group of people that I work with at the place I work in Oregon. And we did volunteering at a local park. So we were supposed to do it a couple weeks ago, and it was like 38 degrees, downpour rain. It was, wasn't going to happen. So we ended up having it this last Saturday. There was about 20 people who came out. We had snacks and treats, and we cleared out this park. We got into the blackberries, we got into the sticky, what do they call it? Sticky bushes. They're just sticky stickers here out in West Coast, but it was a mess. It was dirty. It was, rough job, but it was like so incredible to have an opportunity to connect with people in a work environment in a way that we feel like we're giving back in the community. We're connecting and getting to know one another. It was the first time that we had done anything like that since I've been with the company, almost a year now. And this particular park in Little Oregon, this is the first time they've ever had a company adopt it.
Oh my gosh, I love this so much.
It was amazing. It was really, really fun. And so, it's one of those things that I think for me anyway, this is the second time I've worked somewhere where we adopted a park. And I really, truly believe that every HR person out there, if you don't have something that you're tapping into with your community, whether it's adopt a park, adopt a whatever it is, where then you can bring people out and you can actually experience and do things that are contributing to the community. I just think that is one of the greatest things that I've been able to do in my HR career at the few different places I've worked at, because it's such a shift. It's such a shift in awareness for employees to be able to kind of come together in a different way. And a lot of employees, right, they'll poo-poo it, and I don't want to cut, that's more work, blah, blah, blah. But it's for the people that do, you kind of are able to see a whole different experience. And so it was pretty fun. So that was Saturday morning. And then almost the rest of the weekend, I was crashed. I was so exhausted. And then I had to have a help a friend move yesterday. So it was kind of go, 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 but in a good way. I'm feeling really good.
I love that.
To work. So yeah, that was my highlight. How about you, Katherine?
I love that. Well, excuse me, my highlight's a little bit different, but you're, of course, as usual, because this is what happens in this podcast, you just get me thinking about things. When I was in the public sector in HR, this is almost a decade ago now. We did a lot with the community. We did habitat, and I agree. You do get to see a different side of your employees. And I know I sound like a broken record, but studies have proven that when we give of ourselves, that is when we get out of our own heads. And we can sort of help ourselves with any rumination that's going on, any sort of woe is me type of thoughts that are going on when you help someone else, when you give back in that type of way. It is just so powerful. And to tie it into episode 17, today's episode, taking off the HR mask, I do think those types of opportunities allow our employees to get to see HR as caring human beings. And we get to have different conversations. We're outside of the office. And I think it's just one of the coolest things. I really do. Volunteering, giving back to your community. It's one of the most powerful things that we can orchestrate in HR on so many levels. But to answer your question, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it can be tricky because for a lot of us in HR, there's just so many other mountains of things that we have as expectations. And a lot of them are like legal and reports and this and that. So it feels like down the list in terms of priority.
Oh my gosh, totally.
Right? Like I completely get it. I completely know it. I completely lived it. And I think it's one of those that you gotta just commit and you have to just do it. It's like getting up and it's working out and it's eating the veggies. You gotta do it. All right, you're up, girl. How about you? Tell us about your weekend.
Well, to tie it in, I spoke at the Denver Mile High SHRM conference last week.
Wow.
So that was on Wednesday, and I live about 4 hours from there. So I live near a town called Aspen, and it sounds like it's in the middle of nowhere, Colorado, if you're not familiar with Aspen, but Aspen's very affluent. So it's always such a treat for me to be able to go down to Denver to the Front Range, and I love to be outside. So I forced myself to go shopping. I know a lot of women are like, what do you mean forced yourself to go shopping? I own who I am as a person authentically. I don't like to go shopping. I want to be mountain biking. I want to be running. I want to be camping. I want to be doing all the things outside and connecting with nature. Like that is just what fills my cup. So I treated myself after a day of shopping. I went in the middle of nowhere. I camped by myself, and tying it back to what you were saying, Jen, when I met my partner, Brett, about 9 years ago, when we go camping, we clean up. We always clean up at least 10 pieces of litter around our campsite. We just like to leave it cleaner than when we found it. So it's just all about like taking care of Mother Earth. So I went camping by myself, which was the greatest refresh for me. I've had a lot going on in my business, which is really exciting. Obviously traveling to speaking engagements, all those types of things. So it was so wonderful for me to just sleep on the ground and go mountain biking and rejuvenate in that way so that I am ready on this Monday morning to hit the ground running. I am just ready. So I just encourage all of our listeners to do you, whatever that looks like. Take care of yourself, not just on the weekends, but find that time for yourself during the week too. Really take care of yourself.
Love it. I'm so envious. Not only was I so envious about not being able to go to Mile High last week because I'm all the way in Oregon. I'm like, oh, Denver. But I mean, the idea of you solo and camping and just, oh my gosh, so amazing.
It was so fun.
I adore you so much. I adore that courage that it takes. You know, how few people can just be like, I'm just going to put camp right there.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a lot of really close girlfriends who are in awe that I do this. I just go off and do these things by myself. But I have one very good friend who's a couple years older. She's about mid-50s. And she has started. She's like, you really inspired me. I have started camping by myself. She's single. She's in her 50s. She had a partner for about 17 years and they never married. She's single and she is getting after life in her mid-50s in a way she never has before. Mm-hmm. And I think this absolutely ties in today's episode. What does it mean? By the way, today's episode 17, is technically and officially called Take Off the HR mask, why authenticity and transparency are a must in HR. And I would go so far to say why authenticity and transparency are a must in our lives. I mean, we've already started talking about how this applies to our personal lives, being your genuine self. And how do you show up at work in that way? And how do you show up in life in that way? As
Mhm.
you, as opposed to what society tells you to be, what society tells you to show up as in HR. So that's the whole topic of today. We'll probably stay focused on work a little bit, which is fun. But should we just pivot? Should we just dive right in, Jen?
Let's do it. Let's
I
go
mean, I
in.
could talk about camping until the cows come home, but Jen, just so we're all on the same page a little bit about what we're talking about in terms of the words transparency, authenticity, HR mask, could you just share with us and our listeners? Same thing. Us and our listeners are the same thing. We're just going to have a good laugh about that. Tell us what you mean when you say HR mask and transparency and authenticity. What do those words mean to you? Just so we're all clear before we really dive in deep.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. So that they can mean different things to different people. And even as you and I were doing prep, we're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I think,
Yes.
when we think of a mask that we wear, it can include both transparency, right? What we have to keep, what we can't share. This is part of the role within HR, that transparency piece, right? The transparency of like raising the curtain or being able to kind of be completely open with things. And then there's the masks that we might wear because we have fears around being able to express and be as we
Mm.
may truly be. And that's a whole nother thing. And I think a lot of times when people are thinking about the mask we wear, especially in HR, it seems to like come up quite a lot, right?
Oh, yeah.
Is when we talk about this mask that we wear in HR, I think a lot of times what we're talking about is transparency. And I think what we're really referring to is the inability that we have to be able to be transparent. But
Mm.
in reality, I think where we end up getting ourselves tripped up is this idea that we need to withhold everything. That
Ah,
because of the roles that we have within HR, now there's this complete shield around ourselves. And I got to be totally honest with you. I spent many, many, many years kind of taking advantage of that, right?
ooh.
Kind of using that shield as a self-protection type of thing in an interesting way. Like we could go on a tangent about that, but there is something protective about being in a role where you're like, can't share anything, right? Like there's a safety in that. And I
Oh
think
my gosh, I've never thought about it that way.
oh, yeah, like, I believe that about myself for sure, and I bet you there might be a person or two who resonates with that, right? Like, the role of HR in itself has a shield around it that felt really
Ooh.
safe for me for many, many, many years, and it really wasn't until I did a lot of that inner work myself to be able to start to actually be able to differentiate between the different types of masks, right? That transparency side. And then I was like, oh, wait a second. Actually, actually, if I'm being really honest with myself, part of this mask that I'm wearing is because I'm hiding. This role allows me to hide. It's easy, it's safe, it's comfortable. And all of that was just something I was able to incorporate within, my reality of HR. And here's what it did. And we're going to talk about this next week, but it only just led me down the road of burnout. It absolutely, without a doubt, only led me down the road of burnout when I then used that mask within HR to feel like I could safely hide. Because then I was not then truly,
Truly.
truly being like my truest authentic self. I was hiding from that. So authenticity to me is where you can really start to take that right turn and be able to say, hey, wait a second, is there part of myself that I'm actually hiding as part of this mask that I'm, wearing in this role. And when I started to pick at that and started to kind of do that work within myself, that's when I realized that that authenticity piece is where I was getting tripped up. And that piece around being able to be so truly, fully, genuine at all times is really where I'm doing the work now and have been over the last few years. So it's not perfect in any way, but I've 100% come to a place that regardless of, the role that I have within HR, regardless of the layoffs that might be coming, which are not, by the way, but I mean, regardless of like what I have to hold within myself, within my role,
Yeah.
I can still 100% every day show up as my most authentic self. Those two actually, when I'm really finally being more honest with myself, are separate. And that has been one of the biggest game changers I've ever had. It's like you have this mask, but we need to be really clear about what and about why. I went on a tangent.
Oh my gosh, though, I have never thought of the fact that HR in a way as a profession almost allows us to hide a little bit. It is this
Mhm.
built-in safety shield. And of course, I'm interpreting this, what you just shared, through my own filters, right? So this may not be what you meant at all, but the way it lands for me, what you just shared, is because we have, this certain role that we are supposed to adhere to or step into, that we don't have to show up as our authentic selves, because it's almost this persona that we're supposed to be.
That's a good way to describe it.
What's that?
That's a good way to describe it, as a persona, right? A
Well,
character.
yes.
Mhm.
And sure, you can be this character, you can be this persona, but Jen, I couldn't agree more with you that for me, I always felt like people hated me because I was in HR. So I was always fighting against this label, this
Mhm.
profession, and therefore was coming forward with this persona that wasn't me, because I felt like I had to stand up for my profession and be this certain person. And I totally did not allow myself to just be myself at work. And exactly what you just said, completely burned out because of it.
Mhm.
I burned out. And I think this very much ties into burnout. And I'm sure we'll cover that today too.
It'll
Absolutely.
be
And
a great lead-in.
I loved your tangent. As usual, like if one of us goes to left field, the other one's like following with the mask. We're just like, it's what I love about our podcast. We
Yeah.
are real all the time in this podcast. So, I know that in your Facebook group, you have just an incredible community. What is it, like 17,000 HR women?
Mhm.
Is that about right?
It's
How
about
many?
right. It's about
Yeah,
17.5 at this point, yeah.
17.5. Super active community. And I'm curious if you did a poll this week or you threw out a question about the HR mask and about authenticity. And if so, what was revealed this week?
So this week I was a little behind, but I got it out on Friday or Saturday, and I asked the community, what does wearing a mask look like to you in your HR role? So a couple responses that I got with that is, I had a gal named Dixie. She wrote, I think wearing a mask is part of HR. At the
Ooh,
core, I am the same person at work as I am at home, with morals, values, and integrity. But with my coworkers, will my coworkers ever experience the person I am in private with my best friend? Nope. There's a level of professionalism that comes with the job. Our people look to us to maintain composure. Another gal had said something about neurodivergency, which is super interesting, and talking about like
interesting.
yeah, that one is a whole thing we could go down.
Yes.
And then we had a few people saying, that they were excited and felt like they didn't have to wear a mask, and other people saying, but you have to wear a mask. And that's
Yes.
kind of where it gets back to what we talked about earlier. It's like, I think that there may be a good opportunity to redefine what we mean by mask.
Yeah.
What is optional? What is required, right? And what can we make intentional? And
Yeah.
so that within the group was really interesting, because I think so often, so many of us in HR still go to that place. Well, that's a part of the job. That's what and like I said, I think that there's a big chunk of it that can be, but if we can't compartmentalize the part that has nothing to do with us, right, that we have to hold on to and keep safe, and then the part that is us, right, our genuine, authentic souls, and how can we still be able to share ourselves out in the world in a way that can honor. Because that's where
Yes.
the disconnection, I think that's where then burnout and exhaustion comes from, is we're constantly
Yes.
fighting against, who we are with, what is outside in that world. And so that's what I heard over and over again, with the survey. Was there any of those that stood out to you, or was there any response that, for you, that maybe perhaps, would have come up, a few years ago, that you would now, reflect differently on? So tell me your thoughts about the
Well,
survey.
what you just shared, the answers being sort of from left field to right field and everywhere in between. Yes, I need to wear a mask. No, I would never wear a mask. And then everything in between is exactly what I experienced when I posed this question back in October, when I started HR Empower Hour. I
Mm,
was with a local SHRM group where I live, and there were about 17 of us. We were in person, which is so fun. And I
mhm,
asked the question, do you feel like you have to wear an HR mask? Same experience that you experienced in your Facebook group this weekend. The answers were all over the board.
mhm, mhm,
And I think oftentimes when we think, well, I have to be professional, I have to put on this certain persona, people expect me to be calm and composed and professional. And Jen, we were talking about this as we were getting ready to go live today, that where my mind goes is, if you do the work, if you prepare yourself to get calm, to meditate in the morning, Jen, like you do, I believe, every single morning, and have the systems and practices in place, where if you find yourself getting really mad, getting really angry, it's okay. Be that authentic version of yourself. And yes, be professional. Do what it takes to get back to that calm state, to get back to that compassionate state. So I'm not saying that, there's, I don't know, my words are going to be all over the place today because of something that happened last week. So I want to share that in a little bit. I do think that stepping into the highest version of ourselves, being authentic, which is synonymous with genuine, being authentic when we are living our values and we get back to living those values. If we ever get dinged and out of place about them, I think that's sort of where our power is. And I think that's where you and I are, at least, are in agreement with that HR mask coming off.
mhm. Yeah, that it needs to come from a place of authenticity. Is that what you're saying?
I think so. I
Yeah.
think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and it will liberate. It will
Yeah.
liberate for those holding on to that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let's go a little bit deeper. I mean, have you ever experienced a time at work where you felt like wearing an HR mask was essential? In your 20, how many years has it been now? 25?
Yeah. Yeah. I started, I mean, because I've taken a couple breaks here and there, but I started in HR in 2000 for me. And I know for you it
Amazing.
was in 97, right?
Same thing.
A days off.
Same thing. Forever, Jen, forever.
No, honestly, I truly, truly believe for many, many years again that there definitely was this need to have the full face mask, right? Like let's go full
Yes.
face mask. And
Yes.
so in years ago where, you're leading up to layoffs and weeks in advance that, you're going to be going down this road.
Yes.
And that's really painful situation to be because not only are you putting on the mask around what you can be transparent about, obviously, but you're also like having to wear this mask because of everything within you that's fighting that's fighting against the reality of what
Yeah.
is. And that's a really hard thing. And I think in looking back to that happened the last, huge layoff thing, it was over 10 years ago.
Hmm.
And, since then I've come so far and I've done so much, within myself that I would never, and it's fine. It's fine. Bless my heart. I would never show up the way that I did in the past for situations like layoffs in the ways that I did because I didn't know any better. I didn't really
Right.
know any better in terms of how I could truly be authentic and genuine within myself and really be there for others
Mm,
in those types of situations. And I think at the time I was so consumed with, the mask and the expectations that, I had on my end that it can be really difficult to be able to kind of um, lean over the aisles, reach over the aisles kind of thing. And I think that is
mm.
something that's shifted so much. I remember before moving from Sacramento to Oregon, I was working for an organization. This was the first HR job that I had after getting an MBA, which at the time I was like, oh, I got an MBA. But it
Yes.
was like one of the things that did for me, which I'm sure other people can relate, is gave me imposter syndrome times 10. Right?
No
As much
way.
as I'm proud of that achievement, the first job that I ended up working at was like, a pretty exciting job. I got to do a lot of strategic and project work and got to work with the owners. And, it was like a real, like, here you go, kind of stepping into it right
Yes.
after getting the master's. And I remember before we were moving up to Oregon on my very last day, they threw me a surprise party, which was in and of itself like something that was overwhelming. But I remember they were like, "Oh yeah, Jen, give a speech, give a speech." And at the end, I'm like, "I don't know how I fooled all of you." I'm like, "I feel like the biggest fraud in the world." And I said it. I don't even know why I felt so bold in that moment, but I'll never forget that moment because in my heart, I was speaking my truth. Felt like a fraud, didn't feel like legitimately like worthy of the honor that I was being given, right? There was a room full of people
Sure.
and everyone's like, you did so great. We were so happy, da, 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 da. And I couldn't take it. In my mind, I'm like, this isn't real. This isn't real.
Wow.
Right. And like this buzzer was going off. And I think in retrospect, I was there for 3 years, and at the time, that was the longest job even that I'd ever
Yeah.
been in, and I proved myself over and over again, but yet because I had this mask on around not really being able to feel comfortable being my genuine, authentic self, and I felt like I was constantly trying to, like, project things that were needed in that business environment, I think it took part of me away. And I think that
Mhm.
that expression on that last day of feeling fake and a fraud was my one time in that time that I worked there where my truth was really kind of coming out in a way that like, yeah, it was so interesting, but truly I think that that's how we feel so often is like we're doing the job, we're getting it done. Yet underneath it all, we feel like something's, it's not truly us. right? It's not truly aligned with who we are. And so, yeah, that was like the with this one time where it glaringly stood out to me that I had this
Mm.
mask on, and the time I took it off on the very last day, right? I was like, it felt so liberating to do so, and yet it helped me realize, wait a minute, I've been living kind of a lie for 3 years, right?
So
And so
interesting.
yeah, it's so interesting, and I think so many of us do it, and when we're being really, really true with ourselves, we can see, "Oh, wait a second, that wasn't really me. Who was that? What was that?" Right?
Right.
But that was the mask. That was the mask that I thought I needed, and so then I moved up to Oregon and started working through all the things, and, now it's a totally different thing, but I think, that's my story, and one that I think a lot of people can relate to around that we hold on to so tightly, and yet it was never needed.
Wow.
What about you? Like, do you have a good story, a situation where you can share about
I mean,
authenticity and
as usual, I had something I wanted to share, but then as you just shared, my mind went to a completely different place. This happens every single episode, which I think is so fun.
sorry, not sorry.
Not sorry. So in my 20s, right? I started in HR when I was 22 years old. And in my 20s, I was with an organization. I loved it. And I had this certain persona. I was young. I was trying to prove myself. I was trying to prove to the 60-year-olds in the organization that I knew what I was doing, that I was smart, that I knew the laws, that back then there wasn't a degree in HR, right? My bachelor's degree was in sociology and business administration. So I was trying to show up in this certain way. And then I left. I went to another organization, and um we recruited from Ivy League schools. So again, I felt like I had to show up as the smartest version of myself. Do not let anyone know you have a learning disability. And again, I thought I had to show up in a certain way.
Yeah.
And so that was my 30s, quite literally. And then when I turned 40, I went to my first public sector job and was still showing up in a certain way, but it was a little bit different because this was the public sector. I was
Mhm.
dealing with non-Ivy League educated individual. It was a totally different group, a totally different culture. So I felt like I had to put on yet another mask as a 40-year-old woman and show up in a totally different way. So Jen, when you say, I felt like, I couldn't truly be myself and I needed to take this mask off. It really wasn't until that third job in my 40s where I felt like I really started taking it off for the first time.
Mm.
I'd always had friends at work. But this time I started showing up at work differently. It wasn't just going for hikes or runs or going to the bars with coworkers after work where my mask came off. My mask started coming off during work. And not to say that there were times like you just shared where, fortunately for the 5 years I was there, we didn't have any mass layoffs, even though COVID did happen during then. We took a different approach to COVID. We retained all of our employees. So I didn't have to go through any of that, although I did during the great, recession and during 9/11 and many times in my past. It was the first time where I did just start showing up as me. And in some ways, it was very well received. And in one way in particular, because I started really, it started happening over the 5 years. It wasn't necessarily well received because I started showing up in a way in terms of gender and pay equity. I started standing taller for myself in a way I hadn't before. So when I
Mm.
showed up for the interview, I showed up with my mask, kind of like this, very much on. And then when I started standing taller and taller and taller, for gender equity and pay equity, it wasn't necessarily well received. And yet, I've never been more proud of myself in my entire life. Right? So it's okay to change and evolve and stay true to your values. That was something that's always been important to me. And yet, I started showing up over the course of those 5 years a little bit differently, a little bit more self-assured. And I'm really proud of myself. I know that some people were like, whoa, 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 how dare you stand tall for women, right? So it was very, very interesting. And I've also never been more proud of myself. And there are a lot of people who are very grateful for the way I ultimately showed up. And now how I continue to help other women develop their skills of advocacy and assertion and confidence and things along those lines. So again, I just went to total right field.
No, I love that so much because it really reminded me. So really quick before we move on, only
Yeah.
because we just
Yes.
talked a couple weeks ago of how, I got fired from a job.
Yes.
So, I went through a huge kind of transitional period where, I was in HR for 20 years and then I stepped away to do coaching and then I came back into HR. And that first role coming back into HR was finally truly and fully me for the
Woo!
first time.
Yes.
And it got me fired. I think, being, that true authentic self, there is risk to it, right? Not
Yes,
everybody
there
is
is
going
risk to it.
yeah, not everybody is going to embrace that honesty or that, clarity. And, some of those things are not going to be received well. But I will tell you without a doubt, I've never been more proud of
Yeah.
my willingness to show up as myself regardless of the circumstances. And so I think that's so beautiful that you could kind of see that and recognize, but it was me, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of if other people didn't accept it or like it, right? Those who do and those who will be attracted to us the more that we practice our authenticity within ourselves. So, I mean, that practice of like doing that and being consistent about that will pay dividends, but it's gonna be a little sloppy at first.
Well, right.
That I can say without a doubt for sure, because I know it was for me and I know that you can relate and anyone else as well. You go 20 years or you go many, many years doing what you think dutifully that you're supposed to do in terms of wearing a mask and not being able to be your true self.
Right.
Taking that off is, it's going to take a little bit of finesse and kind of working through and what that looks like. But once you get there, it is a tremendous game changer. And I know that
Yes.
I can say that from so much experience of being in the role that I've been in now almost a year. I'm like, this is
Yes.
different. This is completely different. And a
Yes.
lot of it has to do with authenticity in the mask, I believe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you kind of hit the nail on the head that as human beings, we evolve and we
Mhm.
change and we grow and we learn.
Thank God.
And thank God. And there's a quote by Maya Angelou. I'm not going to nail it, but it's something about, you do your best, but when you learn to do better, do better. Something I butchered it.
Good enough.
And
Good enough.
yes. And I do believe that the longer we live, the longer we're in HR, the more we experience, the more there is an opportunity to show up in our authentic, in an authentic way and in as the highest version of ourselves. Truly, truly. And maybe that's age, maybe not, but I do think it explains why so many of us reach a certain point where it's like, I just need a fresh start. I need that new opportunity. I sort of need a new audience because I have become this different version of myself. And it's okay because your next level organization is out there. I mean, Jen, I know how much you are just in love with your current position. And
Mhm.
I feel the same way with my consulting client. I am doing so much work with one client that I don't have any other HR consulting clients right now. I'm coaching people, but the consulting side of my business, I have found my people because I am 100% me. I am 100% authentic. I am 100% genuine with this current organization in all of my stance on pay and gender equity. And they are like, we want you more. So I do think I completely agree with you that if you have started with some sort of a mask on, of course, it's going to feel uncomfortable taking that mask off. Of course, people are going to look at you and say, what's going on here? And that's okay. Because once you do start to peel the mask off a little bit, your burnout will subside because you're not in consternation with yourself anymore. You are just showing up strong, proud, tall, confident, as an advocate, very resilient, all the things. It's really cool. Jen, why is this HR mask topic so controversial? Why do you think in your Facebook community you got answers from women? Because I know your community is all for HR women specifically. Why do you think so many women feel like no, I have to wear my mask? And then other women are on the other side of the spectrum saying, no, you have to take it off. Why is it so controversial? Why do you think that is?
Yeah. If I'm being really kind of blunt about it, I think the biggest thing it comes down to is programming. And I think that, many of us in this industry, in this field, really have come to believe. I mean, for those of us who are more veterans, I guess you could say, but gosh, I mean, just think about like how the last 25 years have come when it was, what was it? When we first got into HR, it was like personnel, something, it was like we couldn't have been treated more like meat, right? In terms of
Boom.
people within organizations.
Yes.
Right. And I will never forget when I first got into HR because there was a very big part of me was like, F this, right? I mean, it was very black and white, and we've talked about it in previous podcasts, but it was really difficult for me to kind of acclimate myself into this world that didn't feel super warm, didn't feel super inviting, but yet I did, right? And so many of us do, will acclimate. And so what happens when we acclimate into environments? Guess what? We start to take on different traits and we take on these things without even
Ooh.
recognizing it. This is the programming, right? So you start to take on these things because now we're trying to please within the environment that we are, right? And not recognizing that we are the catalyst. We are the catalyst. And
Yes.
so in getting to that place, it's took me a long, long time. And my goal is to find younger and younger sprites out there who really can get this, because I
Yes.
think at no fault of our own, we were put into a system that indoctrinated us into believing that this is who we were supposed to be, that we had to be, we had to turn ourselves off, that we had to be, I mean, right? Like you look at the,
Yes.
the men business environment, that's part of the reality of it. So how do we untangle ourselves from that reality that most of us have been a part of for many, many years? One step at a time. But it's
One step at a time.
controversial from the perspective of like I've worked with, women my age and younger, older, who really truly believe that indoctrination, right? They really truly believe that that's who we are, that's what we
Yes.
do. You
Yes.
shouldn't do this. And I get that. I totally get that with full compassion,
Yes.
in my heart, to understand that that is a strong belief that people hold on to and they ground themselves into it. And yet, for me and you, and for others out there, we are offering this other solution that has transformed us
Yes.
and can transform other people by
Yes.
recognizing that if you can compartmentalize the idea of the mask from the transparency to the authenticity, it's everything. It's
It's
everything. And so that
everything.
controversial piece is really because I think we just need to talk about it more. It's not so controversial once we can kind of really get it out there and be able to start to kind of work through these different pieces. So
You're
that's
absolutely right. It's funny because I talk so often of this about archaic approaches to the workplace.
mhm.
And there are so many of my when I have had the ability to work with multiple organizations at the same time, that there are certain organizations that have this, what I call an archaic structure. And it's not that anyone's done anything wrong at all. We have just passed along from generation to generation. This is what the workplace looks like. This is what you show up as. This is your role. And that is great. That is fine. And there is a different way. And I also work with what I call progressive organizations who are kicking the archaic structure to the curb. And anywhere from law firms to public sector clients, private sector clients, and everywhere in between. It doesn't have to be that traditional performance management structure that ask any HR practitioner that system's broken. So, Jen, this is what I love about this podcast and about our relationship and about the people that we deeply and truly connect with. We, after collectively, between the two of us, 50 years in HR, can say, you know what? It doesn't work. The HR mask doesn't work. And it's okay to take it off. It's okay not to necessarily, buck the system. And I think about that group, Disrupt HR. It doesn't have to be super aggressive, super, about face 180. It's just about showing up as your authentic self. Truly. It's as simple as that and as complex as that, all at the same time. Truly, truly.
Truly.
Truly. Yeah, I mean, I have stories for days about the HR conference I was at last week, but I want to sort of shift us into what about the legal side of things? Obviously this is controversial, a little bit. And if you do remove the mask, are there legal ramifications if and when you do take it off and start showing up a little bit differently?
Hell yeah.
Tell us
Yeah.
more.
Hell yeah, there can be, right? Like when
Yeah.
you start becoming more authentic and genuine, we were talking a little bit earlier about layoffs, and you had said in the pre-show something about like, having a really hard time not going to individuals, knowing, what's about to happen to them. I think
Yes.
we're put into situations often, right? Being in the roles that we are, where we have information that we may or may not share. And yet the ramifications of that information are significant. And so we
Yes.
have to sometimes make those judgment calls. And those judgment calls also come to what could possibly get out, what could possibly be risk, what could, like these are the things that we have to do all the time, right? In HR, this is part of the role. And so I get that. I get, that fear and concern that many might have by, oh, if I expose too much, now I'm putting the company at risk. I had one HR person just go on and on and on when I was coaching them about fears of being personally liable because, as they were, doing performance things and, they were calling things out and the person was just ridiculously not taking ownership on anything and started threatening. And so this particular HR person bought into it and then just allowed that to just ruminate, in their minds of, oh no,
Yeah.
I might be personally liable, not this person, but everybody. I can't say anything now. And anything. I get it, right? Like I totally
Yes.
understand that fear, and yet, do it anyway. Do it anyway. We have to find a way to be able to learn how to show up as our truest selves and still be able to like hold on to the things that we need to hold on to. And that's not easy. I totally get that,
Right.
especially the more complicated the situation, if there is a layoff, if somebody, if there was a 9/11, if there are big situations, this is really not easy stuff. And that's why you and I are here. This is what we do. This is why we do it, is really about helping people to kind of recognize, yes, you can do both. So, yeah, I think, the legal piece is a part of our world, it's what we sign up for, right? And so we have to have that awareness. And at the same time, we need to be ourselves anyway. What about you, Catherine? Where do you go when you start thinking legal and laws?
I mean, I'm trigger warning. Trigger warning.
Trigger
Everybody,
warning.
just here we go. Take some
Hold
breaths
on.
here. I'm going to give a very specific example. There was an employee who was having a mental health issue, and he needed to, he requested FMLA. And with FMLA, of course, I'm contacting legal, getting advice from legal, because mental health is very important to me. And this specific example is probably why this was years ago now. This employee went on FMLA. We followed legal's advice, right? Of do not let this employee work. Do not let them contact their clients. This employee is on FMLA, and you don't want the employee to be working while they're on FMLA. You need to be supportive, all of those types of things. Okay. So absolutely. We went with the traditional approach to FMLA. And ultimately what happened, and I mean this, trigger warning, this employee took his life. He died by suicide. Okay. And when I brought in the grief counselors into the organization, we were talking about how we took legal's advice, that we almost sort of isolated this person from their life. Because when you think about how much time you spend at work and your clients, your clients are your life. When you cut that person off, granted, this person needed to be on FMLA, he needed to take care of his mental health, absolutely cutting him off and saying, you cannot work, you cannot talk to people. We encouraged employees, like just here, stay focused on that, right? And it was not how I wanted to show up genuinely. And I will never handle an FMLA situation that way again, as advised by legal. I think it would have been more appropriate to reach out to that employee constantly and be saying, how you doing? And be treating it more from that human standpoint. So I think that specific situation changed me as a human resources professional. I think that was when I really started to embrace fully showing up as a human in the workplace and fully allowing humans to human in the workplace and to meet people where they are. And fast forward to last week when I was sitting on this panel, I spoke at an HR conference, and then I served as a panelist, and we were talking about alcohol in the workplace. not in the workplace, but what conversation do you don't, or you do not have, somebody's not showing up to work and then you find out that they're hungover, and are you allowed to engage with an employee about their alcohol consumption? My answer was, hell yes. Absolutely have that conversation. And the lawyer on the far side of the panel was like, nope, don't you dare have that conversation. You are going to be legally liable. And I just completely and respectfully disagree. I really think it's important to be real and have human conversations in the human resources space. I don't know, Jen. I just started talking.
So proud of you and anyone who can, see that, to see that growth. Cause that, oh my gosh, Catherine, that's such a devastating thing to happen. Right. But then to be able to like take from that and say, no, that's not me. That does not align with my values. That does not align with me authentically.
Right.
And then being able to kind of, transform that and be able to talk to it. And that's not easy, right? Like I've had to like be in, similar conversations with attorneys before, and they are looking at it from their lens and their
Yes,
lens only, right?
100%.
And so, in HR conferences and after conferences, that's, not surprising to me at all.
Right.
And good for you. Good for you for kind of standing up and saying, no, that does not have to be the way. Right. Like I hear, the legal concerns that you're sharing with me right now. And that doesn't have to be the way. We can still lean in this situation. So, wow, I'm so proud of you. That took courage, and it's something that you would take with you for the rest of your life, and know that that's, when it comes to the people that we're here to serve, we need to press pause on this, y'all, and really be able to kind of, look at this a little different way, because I think we're missing something big.
Absolutely. And I truly believe, I see it very differently. I feel like if we are being human, if we take off that HR mask and we meet people where they are, even if it is something that is covered under FMLA, like alcohol, like whatever that is, I believe that we're going to avoid a lawsuit if we show up and show that person that we care. And, the lawyer would say, nope, don't cross that boundary, because that's when you get sued. And I say you get sued when you don't show up authentically. You get sued when you stay behind that HR mask and you don't ask someone if they're okay. You don't offer to get them EAP services. You don't serve as that bridge. And you just say, well, I'm not supposed to talk about this. Oh, we started down a possible FMLA ADA conversation. I'm just not. Like, that is when you get sued. When the employee feels shunned, when they feel shamed, when they feel like I'm all alone and no one cares about me. So that's just what I've experienced in HR. And I just want to encourage, whether you're young, old, new, veteran in HR, be you. Come from your heart. And that's just how I feel. And I have been sued. I have absolutely been sued. I've shared about it on a previous podcast about a woman who was pregnant. And we decided to let her go along with 10 other people because it was 2007, 2008. And I got sued because she thought I told the office. I was in one office. She was in a totally different state in another office. She thought I had told people that she was pregnant. And I didn't, because I kept that in the vault because she asked me to. And then I got sued. And it's kind of a part of HR. Sometimes I hate to say it, but at the end of the day, if you're living your values, and my value is confidentiality. If somebody says to me, keep this in the vault, I'm going to keep it in the vault. And I got sued for that. And I'm still okay with that lawsuit because I kept it in the vault.
Yeah. Nice. I love that. What a great example. Such a great
Part of
example.
HR. Part of HR. Boy, I feel like I'm sort of all over the place today. Jen, we talked about this a little bit, but I kind of want to get back to it because I do feel like, especially on a Monday morning, as we're recording this live, I think a lot of people are heading into the office with a little bit of stress, right? Just a little bit of, I don't want to go in. I just feel like a lot of people, if we're being honest, those are the thoughts we sometimes start the work week off with. Do you think there is a correlation? And I already know the answer because you already spoke to this. So how strong do you think the correlation is between the HR mask and burnout?
Yeah. I mean, I think anytime that we are not aligned with who we are and what we are, I think it creates a disconnect. And that disconnect can build, and that building
Mm,
of a disconnect of ourselves with that external world is then what creates overwhelm and exhaustion and burn. I
mm,
mean, there's so many different things that can kind of come to that. But yeah, I think, when we talk about this next week, I'm so excited because I think I really want that to actually be a big kind of focus driver in terms of our conversation is
love
like
that.
us being our truest self and speaking our truth and how that relates to burnout. But right now I don't have any stories specifically. Do you have anything that you can share on that topic?
Not necessarily a story, I don't think. I do think there is a strong correlation.
Yeah.
And it is a perfect pivot into next week, and welcome our listeners back next week that we are going to be doing a deeper dive into burnout. And so stay tuned. We're going to have a lot of stories to share on that one.
Yeah, we'll
So I
think
guess
before
to
next
wrap
week
it
we'll
up,
have a
Jen,
couple.
what's that?
I said we'll have a couple of next week to
Just a
we'll
few,
come armed.
just a few. I mean, to wrap it up, Jen, would you say what is your advice to our listeners out there, to our HR professional friends and colleagues out there? Should you
Yeah.
wear a mask? Is there a time to wear a mask, or should you take it off? What's the right mix?
I think my advice is that let's not get too overwhelmed with the idea of, you either have it or you don't have it.
I
And I
love
think,
that.
yeah, I think that can get, us caught up in so much. And what I would
Yes.
offer is I think, every day is an opportunity to see how for myself, if I'm looking at it for me, every day is an opportunity for me to look at how I can show up as more myself. How can I
Boom.
show up as authentic as I can? How can I be intentional today that aligns with my truth?
Right.
So I don't feel as though I need, and that's really the question, right? Do you feel that you need to put on a mask to not fully be able to express yourself? And that I
Mm,
think is a daily question that I, can ask myself and having a practice where you check in with yourself before you
yes.
start your day on what
Yes.
feels right, what
Yes.
doesn't feel right, what aligns, what doesn't align, and how am I going to be intentional today to show up as the person I most want to be? Those are
Hmm.
like the game changers that I will do for the rest of my life because since starting that a couple years ago, I get it. Right? As soon as I get in that car, now I have some direction. It's
Yes.
not overwhelming with everything
Yes.
going on. I've kind of centered myself. I've
Yes.
breathed, I've kind of calmed, and I've gotten focused around, okay, what's my one priority today? What are my three priorities today? How am I going to have some intention around that? And it's a practice, but
Yeah.
I love it. I
Yes.
love it so much because I don't ever feel myself, getting to that place ever again. And I think part of that was because it was just so overwhelming that we weren't like taking that moment to pause and kind of just reground ourselves. How many of us are doing that, right? Like to actually take
Right.
a minute or two and just kind of come to center and get clear and then
Mm,
move. And so, yeah, I offer that all day, every day.
I love that.
What
I love
about
that.
you?
Well, just to add something slightly different, you know, in HR, probably in any profession, I don't know any other profession because HR is all I know. We have the never ending inbox. If you stay
Mhm.
in HR, your inbox will never be empty, ever, which is great, right? We're always going to be gainfully employed. Um, when I work with people in HR Empower Hour or privately with my one-on-one coaching clients, one thing we work on is our to-be list. We all have a to-do list, but do you have a to-be list? Very similar, Jen, to what you're saying.
Yeah.
Who are you going to show up as today? And get very clear on that. Who are you going to be today? And I do believe in the very, very importance of and the power of a morning practice, that meditation, that getting grounded. And I am flashing back and I am having visuals of driving up to the office and saying to myself, okay, when you walk through that doors and visualizing how I'm going to be, what I'm going to say, the energy I'm going to put forth into the workplace as an HR person. And when that's authentic, it's a completely different experience. You get to step into this person that you love and that you truly are, and you kind of get to exude that, as
Mhm.
opposed to putting on this mask and having there be almost this barrier. You
Yeah.
just get to decide who you want to be
Yeah. That's
every
so
single
amazing.
day.
Yeah, regardless of how you get T-boned, regardless of the
Yes.
100 emails that you're about to see in your inbox that
Yes.
weren't there on Friday, right? Regardless of everything that's going to happen to you, in our external circumstances, but as long
Yep.
as you can continue to find a practice that allows you to root within you,
Mm.
damn.
Game changer. Game changer. All right. Well, on that, let's all root for each other, but more importantly, root and get grounded. And just remember that every single day is truly a great day to thrive and shine in HR. Look forward to seeing everybody next week for Burnout. Jen, thank you. You were
Thank
amazing today. I
you.
learned so much from you as always. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great week, everybody.
Bye. See you everybody next week.